The Grand Imperial Fleet, a breathtaking display of cosmic might, hung in silent, menacing orbit above Xylos. Thousands of warships, their hulls shimmering with the captured light of a distant sun, formed an impenetrable sphere around the vibrant, life-teeming world below. Admiral Cathar, a being whose very name resonated with conquest, watched from the panoramic view screen of his flagship, the Iron Serpent. His multi-jointed fingers tapped a rhythm of anticipation on the armrest of his command throne. Xylos, with its rich veins of exotic minerals and its oceans teeming with bioluminescent life, was ripe for the taking. The final planetary bombardment protocols were nearly complete, the last calculations being run by his meticulously efficient bridge crew. A hum of confident chatter filled the bridge, punctuated by the crisp reports of officers confirming weapon locks and power readouts. Everything was proceeding precisely as planned, another star system on the brink of falling under the glorious banner of the Empire. Suddenly, a low-priority alert flickered on a minor console, catching the eye of a junior sensor officer. "Admiral, a faint energy signature unclassified," he reported, his voice betraying a hint of confusion. Cathar merely grunted, not bothering to turn. "Sensor Ghost, Lieutenant. Dismiss it. Our focus is on Xylos." He'd seen countless anomalies over his centuries of service. Stellar dust, residual energy from a distant nebula, even faulty equipment. This was nothing. The officer, though, hesitated. "Admiral, it's moving, and fast. Too fast for a ghost." Cathar finally turned, his multiple eyes narrowing. "Then identify it, Lieutenant, immediately." The officer's digits danced across his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Still unclassified, sir. No known energy profile. It's small, incredibly small, less than a scout vessel." A collective chuckle rippled through the bridge. A single tiny craft against the might of the Empire's flagship alone, let alone the entire fleet. It was ludicrous. Cathar almost laughed himself. "A brave fly buzzing around a sleeping leviathan," he scoffed, turning back to the view screen. His gaze once more fixed on Xylos. Then it happened, not with a roar or a flash of destructive energy, but with a sudden, unnerving silence. The colossal vanguard, a dreadnought positioned precisely at the 12 o'clock vector, flickered. Not its lights, but its very presence on the Empire's tactical display. Its shield indicators, a moment ago burning green, vanished. Its internal lighting, visible even from the Iron Serpent's distance, winked out like a dying ember. A collective gasp swept the bridge. "Status of the Vanguard," Cathar bellowed, his voice cutting through the sudden stillness. No response. "Sir," a comms officer stammered, "all channels to the Vanguard are dead." Before anyone could process the impossible, another ship, the heavy cruiser Conqueror, suffered the same fate. Then another, and another, in rapid, bewildering succession. It wasn't an explosion, not a destructive impact. It was as if a silent, invisible hand was simply reaching out and turning them off. Panic began to coil in the pit of Admiral Cathar's stomach, a sensation he hadn't known in decades. The sensor screen, which had moments ago shown a vast, ordered formation, was now a confusing mess of flickering contacts and outright disappearances. The anomalous signature, that sensor ghost, was no longer faint. It was bright, distinct, and moving with impossible speed, darting between the crippled behemoths. It wasn't firing weapons. There were no energy blasts, no projectile trails. Just a sudden, devastating stillness that left ships adrift, their systems completely inert. "What is it doing?" Cathar roared, slamming a fist on his armrest. "Fire! All ships, engage the anomaly. Target that signature." But the commands were met with hesitation, then outright confusion. "Sir, we can't get a lock," a targeting officer cried out, his voice tinged with terror. "It's too fast, too erratic. Our targeting systems can't compensate." On the view screen, the mysterious craft, now clearly visible as a sleek, almost organic-looking vessel, danced through the chaos. It was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. No visible weapon ports, no thrusters that belched plasma. It simply moved, a blur of impossible velocity and precision, each pass leaving another ship dark and lifeless. The Imperial fleet, designed for overwhelming force and direct confrontation, was utterly helpless against this ghost in the machine. Their massive energy cannons, capable of shattering moons, remained silent, unable to acquire a target that seemed to exist between moments. Fear, cold and absolute, began to grip the bridge of the Iron Serpent. Officers stared in horrified disbelief as their once invincible fleet became a graveyard of silent titans. The comms channels, once filled with boasts, were now a cacophony of frantic, terrified cries from desperate captains whose ships were inexplicably failing, one system at a time. This wasn't war as they knew it. This was something far more terrifying. A silent, surgical dismantling of their power without a single shot fired in anger. The Empire's grand fleet, a symbol of its dominance, was being systematically wiped out, not by a superior force, but by an unknown entity that treated their warships like toys with dead batteries. And Cathar, the great conqueror, could do nothing but watch, his mind reeling with the impossible implications of what he was witnessing. The silence of the dying ships was louder than any explosion. The anomalous craft, a phantom of motion, continued its terrifying ballet among the paralyzed Imperial fleet. Admiral Cathar, now slumped in his command chair, watched in stunned horror as the last active lights on a colossal battle carrier, the Titan's Resolve, flickered out, leaving it a dead hulk among its equally lifeless brethren. The bridge of the Iron Serpent was a tomb of hushed whispers and the frantic, useless tapping of data pads. Their multiphasic cannons, designed to punch through asteroid belts, remained stubbornly inert, unable to lock onto the elusive attacker. The ship was simply too fast, too agile, its trajectory unpredictable to their advanced targeting systems. It wasn't just speed. It was an intelligence, an uncanny awareness of their every failed attempt to target it. Each time a sensor array focused, the craft would shimmer, vanish for a fraction of a second, and reappear in a different vector, leaving their targeting computers spinning uselessly. It was as if the very air around the ship bent to its will. "Comms, any word from a single vessel?" Cathar rasped, his voice raw. "No, Admiral," the comms officer replied, shaking his head, his face ashen. "Complete radio silence across the entire fleet. We are the only active vessel left in this sector." The enormity of the statement hung heavy in the air. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of lives silenced in minutes without a single destructive blast. It defied all logic, all known forms of warfare. Cathar's mind, trained in centuries of military doctrine, struggled to comprehend. This was not a defeat. It was an annihilation by proxy. A methodical dismemberment of power without a drop of blood spilled. He needed answers, and desperately. Bring up all unclassified and restricted files on anomalous energy signatures, cross-reference with forgotten. Ancient civilizations, theoretical weapon systems, anything, he ordered, his voice gaining a desperate edge. Focus on long-forgotten archives, anything labeled primitive or pre-spaceflight era with unusual energy readings. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate hope that some ancient, obscure data entry might hold a clue. While his crew scrambled, a low, melancholic hum began to emanate from the core of the mysterious vessel, picked up faintly by the Iron Serpent's long-range acoustic sensors. It wasn't a warning, nor an aggressive display. It sounded sad, or perhaps simply ancient. Deep within the primary Imperial data archives, on a long-forgotten, highly restricted server, tucked away in a subsection dedicated to unresolved. Historical anomalies. A single file suddenly activated. It was flagged with a curious, almost whimsical designation. Terra P. Project Chimera. The system, designed for ultimate security, had remained dormant for millennia, its access protocols so complex that no living being had ever managed to breach them. Yet, at this moment, triggered by the unique energy signature of the anomalous craft, it came alive. The file was archaic, its language patterns and technological diagrams belonging to a civilization long believed to be insignificant, a minor backwater world known only as Terra. The data unfolded, revealing schematics for something called a non-lethal incapacitation field and a temporal displacement matrix, concepts so far beyond the Empire's understanding that they had been dismissed as fanciful fiction when first discovered during their early exploratory expeditions. The file described a defense system of unimaginable sophistication, designed not to destroy, but to neutralize, to render an aggressor utterly harmless without a single loss of life on either side. It spoke of protecting a primitive homeworld with absolute unassailable means, a world that cherished life above all else. On the bridge of the mysterious vessel, the lone figure, still obscured by a shimmering holographic display, observed the crippled fleet with an inscrutable stillness. The hum from the ship's core intensified slightly, a gentle resonance that seemed to fill the vessel. The figure reached out, their hand passing through the holographic projection, and a series of complex data streams began to cascade down the display. Images of lush green landscapes, vibrant blue oceans, and small, fragile-looking bipedal creatures flickered into view, the very terror described in the Imperial archives. The figure's posture, though obscured, seemed to convey a profound weariness, perhaps even a sense of regret. They were not gloating, not celebrating. There was no joy in this demonstration of power, only a grim, unwavering execution of a long-dormant directive. The prototype, as the vessel was internally designated, had awakened to fulfill its purpose, to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated, that a cradle world, though long forgotten, would never truly be defenseless. The silence outside was complete, save for the faint hum, a whisper of a distant past echoing through the vast emptiness of space. The Empire's might had been defanged, not by force, but by an unseen, unheard whisper from a forgotten world. The suspense grew, not from a coming battle, but from the chilling implications of this impossible, silent victory. What kind of civilization could build such a thing? And why had it been forgotten for so long? These questions gnawed at Cathar, far more unsettling than any threat of direct attack. The sleek, almost impossibly graceful craft, having rendered the once mighty Imperial fleet into a vast, silent graveyard of inert metal, now settled into a high, stable orbit directly above Xylos. It wasn't hovering aggressively or making any threatening moves. Its presence was a silent, unmoving testament to its terrifying power, a single, enigmatic sentinel guarding a world that had moments ago been on the brink of Imperial subjugation. On the bridge of the Iron Serpent, the last active Imperial vessel, Admiral Cathar stared at the view screen, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning, terrifying understanding. His once unshakable confidence had crumbled, replaced by a profound, chilling sense of vulnerability. This was not a weapon he understood, nor an enemy he could fight. His crew, previously scrambling to make sense of the Terra P Project Chimera file, now worked with a grim, almost feverish intensity. The archaic data, once dismissed as theoretical ramblings, was suddenly the only lead they had. Scientists and data specialists, usually tasked with calculating planetary bombardment yields, were now poring over diagrams that depicted harmonic resonance emitters and kinetic energy nullifiers, all designed to disrupt without destroying. The pieces, slowly, horrifyingly, began to fit together. This prototype was not a ship in the conventional sense. It was a highly advanced, self-sufficient, and impossibly efficient defense system. Its purpose was not to conquer, but to protect. Its method was not annihilation, but absolute non-lethal incapacitation. It was a shield, but a shield so sophisticated it could disarm an entire armada without a single destructive blast. Admiral, the lead data analyst, a usually stoic being named Janox, spoke, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. The Chimera Project. It details a philosophy of defense unlike anything in our records. It describes a cradle, a world that millennia ago sought to protect its species without ever resorting to direct conflict or the taking of life. This vessel, it's not attacking, it's simply turning things off. Janox pointed to a flickering schematic on his console. Its energy pulses aren't destructive. They're precisely tuned electromagnetic disruptions, designed to overload and shut down power conduits, targeting arrays, propulsion systems, anything that could be used for aggression. It's like turning off a light switch on a galactic scale. Cathar felt a cold dread seep into his bones. His empire was built on conquest, on the projection of overwhelming force. This prototype rendered all of that obsolete. It was a ghost, an echo of a civilization so advanced, yet so fundamentally different in its approach to conflict that it made the Empire's methods seem crude and barbaric. He looked at the silent, dead ships outside, once symbols of his might, now just derelicts. The humiliation was crushing, but beyond that, a genuine fear for the Empire's future began to take root. If this technology could be replicated, if other worlds gained access to it, the balance of power in the galaxy would be shattered. As if to answer his unspoken dread, the prototype began to broadcast. Not a threat, not a challenge, but a universal frequency, a data stream that permeated every active communication channel across the system. On the Iron Serpent's main view screen, the broadcast manifested as a series of complex, yet strangely elegant, blueprints. These were the very schematics Janox had been studying, now made accessible to anyone with a receiver. It was the design for its non-lethal disarmament technology, offered freely, without demand or condition. It was an invitation, a revelation. The silent hum from the prototype intensified slightly, a gentle, almost musical tone that filled the bridge, a sound of ancient wisdom and rediscovered purpose. It's sharing its technology, Janox whispered, his eyes wide. It's offering the blueprints for its defense systems to everyone. Cathar leaned forward, his multi-jointed hands gripping the armrests of his throne, his mind struggling to grasp the implications. This was not a trap. There was no hidden code, no malicious virus embedded in the data. It was simply the absolute, unadulterated knowledge of how to create a defense so perfect, so complete, that it negated the very concept of warfare. The cradle world mentioned in the files, the origin of this Project Chimera, had not sought to dominate, but to preserve. It had developed the ultimate deterrent, not a weapon of mass destruction, but a tool for mass neutralization. The implications were staggering. If every world had access to this, if every planet could defend itself without resorting to violence, what would become of empires built on conquest? What would become of the Imperial fleet, now reduced to a collection of deactivated shells? The answer, stark and unavoidable, began to form in Cathar's mind. The Empire, in its current form, was finished. The rules of galactic engagement had been rewritten, not by a declaration of war, but by the quiet, overwhelming presence of a forgotten prototype. The suspense was no longer about a battle, but about the profound, irreversible shift in galactic power. It was about the terrifying beauty of a technology that made destruction obsolete, leaving the Empire stranded in a past that no longer existed, a past defined by a violence that was now utterly meaningless. The prototype was not just a ship, it was a paradigm shift, a silent revolution broadcast across the stars, and its hum, now a gentle, constant presence in the comms, was the echo of a forgotten cradle, singing a new song of peace that resonated with a chilling power. News of the Imperial fleet's complete, bloodless neutralization at Xylos ripped through the galaxy like a sudden, silent supernova. On countless worlds, from the bustling trade hubs of the Cathar Expanse to the isolated research stations, on the fringe of the Orion Arm, whispers turned into shouts, then into incredulous declarations. Holographic news feeds, usually filled with reports of Imperial conquests and minor border skirmishes, now displayed endless loops of the silent, drifting Imperial warships, a chilling testament to an unknown power. The sheer impossibility of it captivated and terrified everyone. Empires, confederacies, and independent worlds alike scrambled for information, their intelligence networks overloading with desperate queries. How could an entire fleet, arguably the most powerful military force in the known galaxy, be rendered utterly inert without a single destructive blast? It defied every known principle of warfare, every strategic doctrine. It was a cosmic magic trick, but one with profoundly unsettling implications. The answer, or at least the first crucial piece of it, came with the prototype's continuous broadcast. It wasn't a coded message, nor a veiled threat. It was an open, universal frequency, a torrent of data streams containing the complete blueprints for its non-lethal disarmament technology. Every receiving station, from sophisticated planetary defense grids to simple civilian comms arrays, began to download the information. It revealed the true nature of Project Chimera, a self-replicating, self-sustaining defense system designed not to destroy, but to protect. The data streams detailed intricate harmonic resonance emitters, subtle kinetic energy nullifiers, and electromagnetic pulse generators, so precise they could target individual systems without affecting the rest of a vessel. It was a defense born of unparalleled ingenuity, designed to render an aggressor utterly harmless, leaving no casualties, no scorched earth, only inert technology. This revelation hit the galactic community with the force of a tidal wave. For millennia, humanity, or Terrans, as they were called in ancient records, had been considered a minor, if surprisingly resilient, species. Their homeworld, Earth, was largely unremarkable on galactic charts, known more for its lush biodiversity than its technological prowess. Historical records painted a picture of a species that had, in its early spacefaring days, struggled with internal conflicts, yet seemed to have eventually settled into a quiet, almost reclusive existence. No one, not the aggressive imperialists, nor the cautious ancient races, had ever suspected that this primitive world harbored a secret of such profound power and philosophical depth. They had always believed that true power lay in bigger weapons, more destructive capabilities. The prototype shattered that illusion. It was a relic from a time when humanity seemingly had envisioned a different path, a path where protection didn't necessitate destruction. On countless bridges and in countless command centers, military strategists and political leaders stared at the incoming data, their faces a mixture of awe and growing fear. If this technology could be universally adopted, what would become of their own military might? What would happen to the balance of power built for so long on the threat of overwhelming force? The Empire's expansionist agenda, which had terrorized so many worlds, suddenly seemed utterly meaningless. Its grand fleet, now just so much space junk, was a stark reminder of its vulnerability. The smaller independent systems who had lived for centuries under the shadow of imperial aggression suddenly saw a glimmer of hope. They had long suffered under the Empire's iron fist, their pleas for aid often falling on deaf ears or being met with reluctant, insufficient support from larger, wary powers. Now a solution was being offered, not by a mighty alliance, but by a forgotten echo from a seemingly insignificant world. Ambassadors from across the cosmos, once wary of the aggressive imperial expansion, began to converge on Xylos, not to salvage the imperial fleet, but to understand the prototype. They wanted to know more about this technology, about the cradle world that had birthed such a revolutionary concept. The initial waves of delegates were tentative, wary. Could this be a trick, a new form of Terran deception? But the relentless, unchanging nature of the prototype's broadcast, coupled with the utterly non-violent nature of the Imperial fleet's demise, began to erode their suspicion. The data streams were clear, precise, and undeniably real. The concept of absolute non-lethal defense was a revelation that promised to fundamentally reshape galactic society. The suspense now shifted from the immediate threat of a battle to the profound, unsettling implications of a new paradigm. How would the galaxy adapt to a world where war, as they knew it, was obsolete? Would those who clung to old ways like the battered empire resist this change? The air around Xylos, once thick with the dread of conquest, was now charged with a new kind of tension. The uneasy yet undeniable dawn of a new era, ushered in by the quiet, powerful whisper of Earth's forgotten prototype. On board, the prototype, the enigmatic figure who had remained shrouded in the ship's gentle internal glow, finally revealed themselves. It wasn't a towering alien warlord, nor a super soldier genetically engineered for advanced combat. Instead, a rather ordinary-looking Terran stepped into the ambient light of the command deck. His name was Liam, and he was an archivist, a quiet scholar who had spent his life sifting through forgotten data streams and derelict space stations. He wore simple, practical clothing, a stark contrast to the sleek, impossibly advanced technology surrounding him. The only remarkable thing about him was the profound weariness in his eyes, a weariness that spoke of a sudden, immense burden placed upon his shoulders. He had stumbled upon the dormant Chimera project during a deep space research mission, a forgotten corner of an ancient Terran archive ship lost in a stellar nursery. He had been looking for old agricultural data, not galactic game changers. He had accidentally reactivated the prototype, a vessel that had simply and powerfully followed its core programming. To defend, non-violently, a concept so radical it had almost been lost to time. Liam was a descendant of the very Terrans who had designed the system, a lineage that had long forgotten the true extent of their ancestors' brilliance. Earth, in its modern era, was a peaceful, introspective world, focused on internal development and sustainable living, largely disconnected from the grand galactic stage. They had embraced humility, forgotten their past technological heights, and focused on simpler lives. Liam, by sheer accident, had pulled back the curtain on a legacy that even his own people had barely remembered. The humming from the prototype's core, which had earlier seemed melancholic, now felt like a deep, resonant sigh of satisfaction, a forgotten system fulfilling its ancient purpose. The first diplomatic contact with the prototype was fraught with tension. Delegations from the Galactic Council, from wary trade federations, and even a handful of shell-shocked Imperial officials gingerly approached the silent sentinel in orbit above Xylos. They expected a being of immense power, perhaps even a vengeful, ancient entity. Instead, they found Liam, a nervous young man trying his best to explain the incomprehensible. He spoke with a quiet sincerity, his voice amplified by the prototype's universal translator. He wasn't arrogant, he was simply factual. "This vessel," he began, his gaze sweeping over the silent, inert Imperial fleet on the viewscreen, "was never designed for war. It was designed to prevent it, to nullify it. It's a shield, not a sword." He explained that the prototype was merely a fraction of what Terrans had once envisioned, a testament to a philosophy of defense that prioritized life above all else. It could disrupt, disarm, and disable, but it could not destroy. It was a perfect, bloodless deterrent. His message resonated deeply with many. Those who had suffered under the Empire's iron fist, worlds that had been enslaved or resources plundered, found a glimmer of hope in his words. The Empire had terrorized them with overwhelming force. This prototype offered an answer, a way to render that force meaningless without resorting to further violence. But there was also suspicion. Many still doubted. Could a single, seemingly unassuming Terran truly be in control of such a profound piece of technology? Was this a trick? A Trojan horse designed to subtly assert Terran dominance? The suspense thickened around Liam. He wasn't a warrior, a diplomat, or a political leader. He was just an archivist, thrust into the galactic spotlight. His gentle demeanor and humble explanations were disarming, yet also fueled a new kind of uncertainty. How could such immense power be wielded by someone so ordinary? Liam, overwhelmed but resolute, now found himself the reluctant spokesperson for a rediscovered galactic truth. He showed them more schematics, explained the underlying principles of the Chimera project. He wasn't hoarding the knowledge, he was actively disseminating it. The very act of sharing such power without demanding tribute or allegiance was in itself revolutionary. He spoke of his ancestors, not as conquerors or supreme beings, but as a species that had made mistakes, learned from them, and then quietly developed a technology meant to prevent future conflicts, only to then forget about it themselves. This humility, this admission of past flaws, was as shocking as the technology itself to the power-hungry empires of the galaxy. Admiral Cathar, now confined to his crippled flagship and listening intently to the broadcasts, felt a profound shift within him. He had always believed in strength, in power, in the right of conquest. But seeing his mighty fleet reduced to dead metal, and then hearing this unassuming Terran speak of peace and non-violence with such conviction, began to chip away at his hardened worldview. The humiliation of defeat was still raw, but now a strange sense of awe began to replace it. This heir to humility wasn't demanding surrender. He was offering a new path. The suspense was no longer just about the prototype's power, but about the profound societal and political upheaval it would cause. Could the galaxy truly accept a future where conflict was rendered obsolete by a forgotten yet incredibly potent whisper from a planet called Earth? Liam, the quiet archivist, was now the accidental catalyst for a revolution, his every word scrutinized, his every action weighed. The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, now rested on the unassuming shoulders of a man who just wanted to catalogue ancient data. The prototype did not leave Xylos. It remained a silent, imposing guardian in orbit, its presence a constant reminder of the paradigm shift that had occurred. Liam, the accidental archivist turned galactic messenger, chose to stay with it. He wasn't seeking power or fame, only to fulfill the prototype's ancient purpose. With the assistance of curious and eager scientists from countless worlds, Liam began the unprecedented task of disseminating the technology. The prototype, acting on its inherent programming, provided direct, unfettered access to its core schematics and operational data. It was an open-source revolution, free for all to learn, to replicate, to adapt. Delegations of engineers and theorists representing diverse cultures and even former adversaries swarmed Xylos. They studied the intricate dance of the prototype's energy fields, marveled at the precision of its non-lethal incapacitation pulses, and slowly, painstakingly, began to reverse engineer its capabilities. The sheer efficiency and elegance of the design left them awestruck. It was a level of technological mastery they had only dreamed of. The non-lethal disarmament systems were swiftly adopted by various planetary defense forces. Worlds that had once spent untold fortunes on conventional weaponry now redirected resources to developing their own chimera protocols. The concept of massive destructive fleets quickly became an expensive, pointless relic. Why build a weapon to destroy when your enemy could simply be switched off without a single loss of life? This ushered in an era of unprecedented galactic peace, not through force, but through the universal neutralization of it. Border disputes that once threatened to erupt into devastating wars were now settled by diplomatic means, knowing that neither side could truly inflict lasting harm. Piracy, once a constant menace, plummeted as pirate vessels found themselves suddenly inert and easily captured, their crews unharmed but stranded. The balance of power, once held by those with the biggest guns, shifted to those with the most adaptable minds and the most robust defensive networks. The once mighty empire, its fleet rendered inert above Xylos, found itself in a precarious position. Stripped of its primary tool of coercion, its vast dominion began to unravel. Conquered worlds, now equipped with their own chimera defenses, peacefully declared their independence. Imperial outposts, unable to enforce their will, simply faded away. There was no bloodshed, no uprising, just a quiet, methodical dismantling of an empire built on the threat of violence. Admiral Cathar, still confined to the Iron Serpent, watched the collapse of his civilization with a mixture of despair and a strange, burgeoning sense of wonder. He had witnessed the ultimate power of destruction, and now he was seeing the ultimate power of non-destruction. The humiliation was still there, but it was overshadowed by the profound implications of what Earth's prototype had revealed. He began to communicate with Liam, at first with questions about the technology, then with deeper philosophical inquiries about the cradle world that had conceived such a system. He found himself, a hardened warrior, listening intently to the quiet wisdom of a simple archivist. In a move that stunned the galaxy, Admiral Cathar, once the Empire's most feared conqueror, became an unlikely advocate for the new paradigm. He publicly denounced the Empire's past aggression, not with fiery speeches, but with a quiet, undeniable sincerity, born of first-hand experience. He shared his insights on the futility of traditional warfare in the face of the chimera technology, proving that even the most hardened warriors could learn from a forgotten ideal. His transformation, from conqueror to convert, added another layer of intrigue and hope to the galactic shift. It wasn't just technology changing the galaxy. It was a fundamental shift in perspective. Earth, once a distant, unremarkable world, was now revered across the cosmos. It was no longer just terror in dusty archives, but the cradle of the chimera, its name spoken with a mixture of awe and respect. Pilgrimages began, not to ancient ruins or battlefields, but to the unassuming blue-green planet, seeking to understand the philosophy that had birthed such revolutionary peace. Humanity, in its humble modern existence, found itself thrust onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as inadvertent teachers of a forgotten path. The prototype had not only wiped out an empire's fleet, but had also illuminated a path towards a future where defense didn't necessitate destruction. It proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its capacity for war, but its profound and forgotten capacity for peace, a capacity that had patiently waited, dormant for millennia, only to awaken and reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. The initial suspense of an unknown threat had given way to the deeper, more profound tension of a galaxy grappling with its own potential for change. A future where the echoes of a forgotten cradle promised not an end, but a truly new beginning.